This is about death in the desert, or accepting death, or vultures, I'm not sure. It's called Sand is Bullshit, etc. Let's start. I blinked once, a nearly audible groan emitting from my eyelids as they attempted to moisten the lost cause that had become my eyes. The sand beneath me burned as it passed through the holes in my boots to further antagonize the blisters, the acrid air leaving my sinuses devoid of any palpable moisture as the empty desert horizon which stood before me. The sun would have dried any sweat upon my brow long ago, had I still been capable of perspiration. I had drained what little liquid I had left from previous days traveling to no more than a cup, which I held in my bosom jealously, as if it may be stolen from me at any moment. I blinked again, the darkness behind my eyelids allowing ample time for delusions of salvation, for the hooks of hope to be laced through my skin and pulled taut as I slunk into the final stage of grief. I wonder if this is how worms feel, laid out across the pavement to dry out in a jerky stick of desperation and ignominy at their futile efforts to survive. The thought rang with clarity outlying among the feverish swamp that had become my mode of function, and it brought with it a pang of deep shame for having tried to cross the tempting summer driveway in the first place, despite knowing this quest to be at a grisly conclusion. The allure of zealous self-destruction in the name of pride consuming me, I knew my hubris to be the fatal internal cataclysm that would seal my coffin. I shook my guilt-addled head and stumbled forward through the haze of dehydration and exhaustion, looking but neither seeing nor comprehending the expanse of dust anymore. The heat lines rising from the sun providing a nearly tangible mirage of water, which I grasped at desperately, vehemently denying the increasingly apparent inevitability of my dry death. I felt the resolve within me crumple, and I shamefully resigned myself to consuming the last of my supplies. The effort, I knew but would not accept, was fruitless and only serving to further extend my time and what I could only assume was purgatory, if not the Big H itself. My thumb felt ready to crumble as it hooked the cap of my bottle, a sudden moment of clarity and relief rushing through my being as I drank greedily. I utilized that fleeting moment to wonder how the hell I had ever been convinced to trek across this particular hellish expanse of superlative bullshit, but I found no justifiable answer within myself. I would have attempted to palaver with God, had I not still felt guilty for the string of expletives I had associated with his character earlier in the day. I had not spoken for days, and that verbal lashing left me incapable of any more tragic cosmic groveling, had I had the energy to do so. The brief moment of solace came to a gratuitous halt as I was brought back to reality, my tongue writhing weakly around the ridges of the bottle, searching for condensation of any sort. My arms slumped in defeat, and I immediately regurgitated my feast, though no bile came with the water. The clump of mud that formed at my feet stood as the symbol to the cruel humor of my fate, but there was no flame nor anger anymore. The vice that had festered within me fading momentarily as my body convulsed in a defeated sob. I was going to die, and my remains would serve as no more than evidence of ill-planned adventure. When my tormentor of mud finally evaporated, I began walking again, no longer feeling the flames of the desert on my feet or the parchment texture of my eyelids, the agony replaced with that final tendril of hope, a spark I knew to be the light of the anglerfish, but I followed anyways, euphemizing my desperation to myself with each step. I turned my gaze to a vulture circling overhead, its wings lazily gliding in anticipation. It didn't matter that the pompous carnivore did not understand my middle finger as I displayed it, for my abrasive gesture was really to prove to myself that my existence had not ceased yet. My desperation did not fully overtake my loathing for the scavenger, however, and I quickly flashed a second non-verbal F you for good measure. I dropped my gaze and wondered whether this was an excessively cruel punishment for all the animals I had insulted in my life, and missed the moment of sanity that came with my respite earlier. As I pondered the recently gained and re-lost structure of my psyche, I felt a warmth spread across my chin and neck, prefacing the steady rhythm of dripping blood that followed. My lips had split like a shriveled clam, blood leaking lethargically from the divide only to leave a crimson stream that matted the tangled hair beneath. I added desert-caused leprosy to the capacious mental list of woes that I carried, allowed them to coagulate into insanity as I continued pitying my own starved form. The vulture had swooped lower and was within yelling distance, eyeing the bloodied stream quickly spreading across my frail figure, and I felt disdain for the feathered beast rise to replace fear yet again as it crept closer, its intentions less than savory. I lunged at the bird. The mutinous twigs that comprised my legs carried me only far enough to shoe the vulture, but I ended up a dormant heap of anguish on the desert floor. My second tormentor of the day returned to their lackadaisical loop above me, reminding me of those macabre Tweety birds that circles the heads of humans and trauma victims in the cartoons. I croaked a laugh at the image, resigning myself to an at least apparently cheerful death, had I not been able to stand back up. I wouldn't give it the satisfaction of my suffering. I couldn't be expected to let that detrimental piece of actual organic expletive know how I feared him, and if my only defense was a laughing, angry death, then so is the way of my world's end. I did not die. I did not get up either. I lay stagnant in my desolation, waiting for that exhale which has no sequel, but my rattling breaths would not disappear with the rest of my will. The air from my lungs turned to a wheeze, my eyes glued shut by the layer of sand grinding into them from the outside. I began to laugh again, resetting my resolve to fending off the inevitable final act that rode on the back of that vulture. I clenched my fist into knotted twine and screamed, the blood from my lip muffling my rage to a gurgle, but I did not cease. I screamed. I screamed until the sand that coated my lips was drawn into my lungs, ripping through the instrument of my pain and leaving me voiceless. I was not dignified with acknowledgement from the bird, and I did not get up again. I promise that not everything I write is really depressing, but most of my characters don't survive. So, might be a theme there, but thank you for listening.